Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Bruce, CMO at Agent Moves, and welcome to our Good to Great series. We're all about sharing great stories from amazing realtors and want to tell you how they got there. So hopefully we can help make more realtors great. Here today, we have a really honored to have Kristan Cole with us. She is a team owner of a nice sized team. We'll get into talking about that. So we'll talk about, of course, the real estate side, but really interested in growing the teams, the success she's had, the challenges she's faced, and so forth. And if you've been watching some of the videos, I love talking about, some of the things that, agents have done prior to how did they get here, right? Something about them. Kristan has some really interesting stuff. She's a pilot, amazing, 5 kids, even more amazing, couple of grandkids, excuse me, went to school for finance and real estate, which is very rare in the interviews I've done. But what I also learned was she grew up in Alaska in a very small town in a small school. So love to hear the story, how it got started, Kristan, and then we'll talk about real estate.
Sure. So in 1969, my dad we moved from Nebraska to Whittier, Alaska. He went to work for the Alaska Railroad, and Whittier it was a military base. And then even today, there's only about 200 residents year round. When we moved there and my father was working for the railroad, there were only 9 kids in our K through 12. So I was the only third grader.
So
Yeah.
how was the experience in a school like that?
I'd come from a bigger school. We had lived in Kansas City for a bit. So, kids are so adaptable. Today I look back on it and I think we were fishing off the dock. We were, going to the salmon run after school. It was in a one room. Well, actually, there were 2 rooms. One was the music room and one was the main room. And in the school room, there were different risers. So the first graders are on the bottom and so on and so forth. We had one teacher. She taught us music. She taught us swimming and PE. She taught us synchronized swimming. So it was really fascinating. And at the time, I just didn't realize how unusual it was. But we lived there. And then in 1971, we moved to a town called Wasilla, which is where I grew up. And then I actually graduated from high school from a neighboring town called Palmer, which really became a city during the 30s when a lot of the farmers moved there during the New Deal. And so in 1980, when I graduated from high school, I decided I wanted to go to college someplace warm, as you can appreciate, and chose Arizona and then double majored in finance and real estate at the University of Arizona in Tucson.
So yeah,
Yeah.
so what a fabulous story and what an upbringing. Like you said, you don't realize it when you're in it, right? What it was, but I'm sure looking back to be able to appreciate this, and I'm sure you told your kids, "What are you talking about? I was in school, had some great school stories, right?" So so talk about now you get involved right away. You're out of, school. You get your real estate license immediately, graduating college. How does it start?
So I started with Remax, which I know is unusual as well. And you just have to remember when I took my test, it was with a number 2 pencil, and then you mailed it to Chicago and waited for 6 weeks to see if you passed. Started selling real estate immediately. And then 2 years later, when I was 24, I became a broker and decided to purchase that Remax franchise. So I became a broker owner at 24. That was also the first year I had my first baby, and then woke up at 31, well, actually 30, and had 5 kids, and decided to go back to school also while selling real estate and having a newborn and get my MBA, which I did. And then a couple of years later, I decided to buy a second franchise in kind of a luxury location of our ski resort. And then just spent, basically 25 years raising kids, running brokerages, and building a real estate team.
Well. So let's talk a bit about building the team,
Mhm.
making the first decision that you're going to build a team. Let's start there, right? I've spoken to other agents. Some have like tried and they said, yeah, I got into building this team and like it was the biggest mistake I made. I failed at this. These were the challenges I found. I'm like better as a solo agent. Tell us about like getting that started, having the guts to do this. This is not you speak, beautifully and calmly about what you've done, but it's amazing, right? To get out and first have the real estate side to this be successful right from the gun, to be able to then within 2 years kind of buy in and own, the first agency. Tell us how it happened, the successes you've had, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges as well. But how did you decide to grow the team, and what was the beginning of it?
So in 1998, I actually went to a REMAX conference and heard a gentleman named Howard Britton speak. And he talked about leverage and talked about finding your genius and what you're really good at, spending your time doing that versus all of the pieces of real estate that still have to be done. That's a really, I mean, in 1998, building a team was not unheard of. And I thought, that is a really great idea. So I went home and I kind of took back then a yellow pad and I started writing down every single day. Like if I could wake up and wave a magic wand, what would I never want to do again when it comes to, the 188 things that have to be done when you list and sell a home? And so I started writing those things down, and really that created a job description. So I really didn't know what I was doing. I was feeling my way through it. I could tell you the first hire was absolutely the hardest because your fear of failure. What if it doesn't work? But fortunately, she was a great hire, and she then later on became an agent herself, became a very prominent property manager, and so she was my first hire. And I didn't even know I was kind of doing it the right way, but I really made 3 administrative hires before I ever made a hire of what we now would call a buyer agent. And it was because I had made that list and was super clear on what I was really good at and what things were really my highest and best use of my time, and also would bring the biggest return in terms of money. And that was being a great listing agent. So in 1998, I started building that. And by 2005, I had a very strong, it was only 5 of us, but that year, we closed, I went on 500 listing appointments that year and closed 355 transactions. So it was a very systematized checklist, very well oiled machine. And I had great people to support the listings, listing coordinator, closing coordinator, marketing coordinator, and then I had a great buyer's agent. And so, it was just ran it very lean and didn't know that it was probably exactly how it should have been built. So
Right.
it was pure luck, honest to goodness.
Luck, but the approach you took, right, which is like what we're trying to do with these videos is share wisdom, right, with other agents on how they can be successful. And just your approach of taking the yellow pad and writing down all of these, the 180 things like you said you did, and what don't you like doing, what don't you do well. That alone, again, I've been doing a lot of interviews, is a fantastic nugget for someone to take away to try and even first figure this out on how are you going to break it up versus just thinking about it and making that hire. It feels, you may say lucky in who you hired, but you did it in a systematic way, which, obviously worked out for you. So now you look to bring agents on, right? Well, first I want to go back to the 500 listings. What did you do then to generate that kind of activity that you were able to go out on, more than one listing a day?
So, first of all, I also looked at all the different lanes of lead generation you could go down. And there's some of them that were not, they're just not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to cold call. I didn't want to call expireds. I didn't want to call for sale by owners. I really wanted to figure out a way to create influence in the community such that people would come to me, that they saw me as the expert with the knowledge that they needed. And so I used, what I would call, still not really knowing what I was doing, but I used marketing to tell the community what I wanted them to know, and did that through postcards and just sold cards, just listed cards. And back then, it's not like today, you send it to a mailing house and they send it out. You buy 10,000 postcards in bulk. And then anytime you want a message, you have to print it on labels. And then you have to put the labels on those postcards, which my children did for me, to mail them out. And then you had to take them to the post office and send them through a bulk mail permit. It was insane. But I think the reason that it worked is because no one else was doing it. And so I was really building a database. I would go determine where I wanted to sell houses. Then I would go to what's called the Matsu Borough Assessment Department, and I'd get a list of people that own houses in those locations. And I would print off labels because remember, 1998, we didn't have big databases and computers, and I had a Rolodex on my desk. And so I just got very purposeful about messaging with whatever message I wanted them to know. I sold something, I listed something, I'm an expert in 1031 exchanges, whatever it was, to the neighborhoods that I wanted to get more listings in. And that worked. That was so building a database early on from the beginning was, I think, really the key to my success. And I think the bigger key was no one else was doing it. They
Yeah.
really weren't.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, yeah. It makes great sense. Then gave you the platform. And then, okay, so now you get into, the growth mode, right? It's working, you're growing, you start to bring in, is it a buyer agent that's first that you bring on?
No, I first brought on a listing coordinator.
Listing agent? Okay.
I was really good. I took a lot of listings. Of course, that created a lot of buyers. I had a lot of kids, so I really didn't want to have to work in the evenings and weekends. And interestingly enough, fun fact, the gentleman that actually became my first buyer's agent, he was a Seventh-day Adventist. So he was happy to work on Sunday when I didn't want to work on Sunday. So it worked out really well. But my first hire was a listing coordinator and then a closing coordinator because I was so listing heavy. If I could go out in the morning, take 2 listings, come back at lunch, give them the files, and then go out again in the afternoon. So by 2005, I was going on 3 and 4 listing appointments a day. But I did it, primarily 3 or 4 days a week, going on those listing appointments. And so it just became, I was very good at what I did, and the listing coordination and the closing coordination were excellent. And then I hired a marketing coordinator. So really the buyer specialist was the last one I hired.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. So as you recruit today, what are some of the things you look for in an agent?
So I call it the 4 G's: grit, growth, grace, and give. Are you a gritty individual? Because this industry, if you're not gritty, if you're not a hard worker, if you don't have tenacity, can chew you up and spit you out. So I'm really looking for people that can show me that they somewhere in their past that they have had to be they I also want people who are growth minded, that they don't want more for more sake, but they want more for whatever their personal mission is in life. And so I want people who really are interested in growing. The fourth component is I definitely want people who are givers, either of their time, their money, their experiences, because all of us were a new agent one time who wrote really bad contracts and needed somebody to help us rather than tell us how bad our contracts were. So are you somebody that's a giver, and can you give grace to those who are new and, need your help? So that, while, you may think that type of a person is a unicorn, they're really not. Typically, I find that most of those people have some sort of a difficult challenge at some point in their life that they had to overcome. And so when it gets difficult in real estate, they are not people who give up. So that's kind of the type, if you call it the avatar of what I was looking for. And at the time, I don't know that I could have articulated it that way, but I can tell you that I was looking for people who were committed. And if I was going to commit to them to teach them what I knew, I wanted some sort of commitment from them as well. And so when you are very clear on what you're looking for and put it out there, it's interesting. It will do 2 things for you. It will attract people to you that are like that, and it will repel people who aren't. So people always say, I'm so afraid I'm going to make a mistake when I hire. Well, the truth is, if you're super clear on the avatar of who you're looking for in an agent, that will be a natural repellent to the people who aren't going to be a fit for your organization. Mm-hmm. So really the chances of you hiring somebody that's not a good fit are it's reduced for sure.
Yeah, yeah, no, very, very good, very, very good advice. And so now, as you find that individual that you're excited about, what excites them about Kristan Cole and your network and the whole team? What's kind of the secret sauce to joining your group?
I think for most people, they enjoy the fact that we have a full team. So they're not, even if they're new, they're not the chief cook and bottle washer, meaning they have support with transaction coordination, with negotiation of repairs, and they have leads that are naturally coming from all of the listings that I have. So most people are looking for actually appointments, leads and appointments. And they also want the administrative support, because most agents, honestly, are not very good with paperwork. So if you've got somebody coming along with them, making sure that the paperwork is done and compliant, so that everybody gets paid on time. Those are two of the things that they're really looking for. And if you can provide those two things and some leadership also, I truly think most of them are looking for that. Once they become more successful, they're looking for a way for me to help them get some of their time back. And what could that look like for them to get more time back?
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I have found, I think, interesting on the paperwork, not liking it. I have found also as I speak to the most successful agents, they feel like the follow up is just, they just wish they were so much better at following up with their sphere, with even calls that come in. I had one agent when I asked her on an interview, can give me like what's the one nugget you would give out to other agents? One of her things was, respond to the phone calls, and I didn't really realize how many agents do get so busy with what's going on. They're working on two or three things, and they put the other things aside and don't make it a priority to keep that pipeline filled with those follow ups.
There's nothing that irritated me more than to see a contract come in on a listing that I had and to look the buyer up and have them in our database and they wrote the contract with a different company. So follow up to me is critically important. And so I knew without a system they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
So I just created the system for them. And by putting, in essence, I kind of became a programmer and I programmed these plans that could get launched on a buyer as soon as you had one that would remind the agents of what they needed to do, so that the number of those falling through the cracks would be minimized. So again, nobody's going to remember everything. You've got to come up with a systematic system to remind you of the calls that you need to be making. And so most of that just goes in a schedule, honestly. And people ask me all the time, well, isn't that kind of boring just following? Like, I can tell you, I do the exact same thing on Monday and I do the exact same thing on Tuesdays. I'm highly scheduled. And because of that, people think that's constrictive, but honestly, being highly scheduled gives you a ton of freedom. You don't have to worry. Go on vacation, you come back and you just do what's in your calendar. It allows you to, what I call, come back into orbit fairly quickly without bouncing off the atmosphere. So it really is, I think, the two greatest things for agents to really embrace is be prepared, meaning take time on a Sunday to get prepared for your week. And number two, follow up. If they could do those two things really well, it would change their world. And even if they're in an real estate market that feels out of control, if they do those two things, they will feel more in control, which is helpful when, interest rates are being volatile or, the Fed comes out and changes their mind. And it's just, what you're doing, it works, follow the system and just have the faith in the fact that I've built this business over 40 years. I can tell you it works if you're willing to follow the system and
Yeah.
do the follow up.
Yeah, excellent. So, what are you doing on the lead gen side to knowing that, like you're saying, for agents to come in, they want to know that they're going to have leads, from the team owner? I know there's a big expectation, from the teams, right? When you join a team, and it's probably, an incredibly high expectation by the agent, and, trying to balance that as the team owner, but yet you want those great agents. So what are you doing to make sure you have a big team? How many agents do you have?
Well, in Arizona, in my brokerages, I have 1,100. Here on my team in Arizona, there's 15. There's several in 5 other states as well. But these are high performing agents doing
Yeah.
20 plus million a year. So I think of it like this. If you look at National Association of Realtors statistics, 88% of all sellers said that they would use their agent again. 90% of them, when they sold, did use an agent, but only 29% of them used the agent they had before. So think about that. They said they would, and they did use an agent. It just wasn't you. Why? It's because someone got in between you and them and the relationship. And 29% of them actually did use their agent. Another 20 some percent were referred. That means somebody got in between you and the relationship. That means you're not communicating with them in a meaningful way that brings value to the consumer. Sending a recipe card is not what I would consider meaningful and valuable. So, how do you get more leads? Number one, in person events. We do large in person events twice a year. We do a lot of, every month, we do a VIP event as well. And that is it's 100% for engagement. engagement in a meaningful way. What is it that you need? How can I provide that to you even before you know you need it? So it really comes down to if you have built a database, and not only do you have listings, which naturally brings buyers, but at the same time, if you are engaging your database in a meaningful way, that is how you make sure that somebody doesn't come in between you and the relationship when they're ready to sell again. And that's what people are missing. They don't realize, a real estate agent doesn't realize that their client is in 13 other people's databases. And so what are you doing to have a meaningful relationship with them that they value so much that when they need gas, they're coming to your gas station? So when you think about leads, there's a lot of people who purchase leads. I'm just not a fan of that. I'm a fan of developing and continue developing the database and getting the referrals from the people that already know and love us. So we focus on events, micro and macro. We focus on referrals, and we also focus on, we have an ISA department who is also calling on and presenting opportunities, for instance, cash offers, get your home value now, for people who may be distraught. Because if you think about it, right now there's 2% of the loans that are underwater. Well, in Metro Phoenix, with 4.5 million people, that's 90,000 people that a cash offer may make a lot of sense to. So, yes, there's always a new funnel, because if we don't have enough in our database to get to the goal that we want, we do need an additional funnel. But I think our primary flywheel is always going to be, your database is your business is your database.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we are totally in tune, and the stats are spot on, obviously, and it's being unforgettable. It's kind of the theme of, what we're doing here at Agent Moves, but that is the idea. You need to be unforgettable. You don't know when that life event's going to happen with that person
Right.
going to sell, right? You can do all of the things, all of the planning, and then a life event happens and you weren't there. You weren't consistently delivering value, to your point, right? Not just a recipe card, but you're always thinking of them and they remember you and you're the first one. I think one of the other stats, I think you had it in there. It's like I think one stat I heard is that only 20% of people see more than one agent. 80% will only see one agent.
What happens if you're not the first one they call?
It's it. You're out.
So what do you do to make sure that you get the call? And I think you said unforgettable. We use the term memorable. Are you creating experiences, whether it's on the phone when you communicate,
Yep.
our macro events, our VIP events? Are you so memorable? And was that experience so valuable that they will call you?
Right. Right.
And
Beautiful. Beautiful.
that's
Last question. Okay. All the positive, awesome, great tips for everyone. So many great nuggets out of it, Kristan. Give us the couple of things to stay away from that you learned in growing a team that, man, I'll never do that again.
don't go looking for the exception. Meaning, I gave you a great way to think about hiring. And then somebody comes along that doesn't fit that avatar and they think, well, I want to give them a chance. I would just say, don't go looking for the exceptions. Are there exceptions out there? Yes. But the challenge in real estate is people, right? Finding the right people. And when people tell you who they are, believe them. And so when you look at their past trajectory, what they've done before, what have been their challenges, why they're getting into this business, what's important to them, and they tell you, believe them. Because if they're getting into this only for money, they will leave you for money. So you just say, you really need to understand who you want to attract and stay firm to that model. Because too many times I've thought, just like you think you can change your spouse, how successful is that? Um, you're not going to change a tiger stripes. And so when they show you who they are, believe them. And then you have to ask yourself the question, is this a right fit for our organization? Because the super majority of I call it the time suck, is the whirlwind, dealing with situations where if we had the right person, 90% of my problems would go away.
Very good. Very good. I think the last thing I'd like to leave people with, I know your charity is so near and dear to your heart and so important. At this point in my life, charity, giving back. Like you said, you always want to hire givers in general, but, kind of the ultimate givers running a charity. It's one thing to participate. It's another thing to do what you're doing. But please, I'd love you to pass on, as we close this out, some information on your charity, and love to be able to promote it.
So the charity is Kristan's Home of Hope. When you support our charity, you're supporting safe housing for at-risk youth. Why is that important? And I think it's important, if you're ever going to start a charity, that you've got to be super passionate about it or it's never going to take off. Most people don't know that the age of 12 and my brother was 11, both of us, we became homeless and we never got to live with both of our parents again. And so there weren't any social services in Wasilla, Alaska in 1973. So it was a very difficult time for both of us. And I wanted to make sure that there was help for other young people that found themselves, because most young people find themselves, they don't wake up and intentionally be homeless. And so what we do know is that if we can get them back in school, get them safe housing, and get them a job or working towards the skills to have a job before the age of 22, the chances of that repeating are seriously diminished. And so I'm super passionate about it. There's 1,100 homeless youth in Wasilla, Alaska. If there's that many in Wasilla, there's that many everywhere. And people say, well, there's so many. And it's like, just take action where you are. So for me, that charity, we just had an event here recently that Stacy was actually at, and we raised $105,000 for Kristan's Home of Hope to do the good work of helping those youth that find themselves homeless, not because of their own doing.
Oh, beautiful, Kristan. And please, what's the website just for anyone interested?
KristansHomeofHope.org. The only challenge is my name is spelled Kristan,
A-N.
KristansHomeofHope.org.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Please, if you please follow Kristan on social. Absolutely. Please go to her charity. Donate. Any way to help would be just fantastic. Kristan, I can't thank you enough. It was just some awesome tips for everyone here. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and really appreciate the time today, Kristan. It was awesome chatting with you.
Thank you so much. It was my honor.